everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by Projections, an IRI company. IRI helps organizations navigate workplace challenges, improve employee engagement and productivity, manage labor relations, and implement effective communication strategies to achieve their goals. For more information, you can visit Projections online at projectionsinc.com. I am Jennifer Oraquah, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. Customer experience is all about perception, how your customers are perceiving the way your company treats them, and how those perceptions affect their behaviors and drive their loyalty. Studies have shown that 32% of customers are willing to walk away from a brand they love because of one bad experience. But 65% of U.S. customers report that a single positive experience with a brand can be more influential than advertising. And customers who have the best past experiences, well, they spend 140% more than those who had the poorest past experiences. So clearly, customer experience begins with the employee experience. And to make a meaningful impact on the way your brand is perceived begins with employee conversations. Those conversations are what David Avrin's new book, The Morning Huddle, Powerful Customer Experience Conversations to Wake You Up, Shake You Up, and Win More Business, is all about. David is a business marketing and branding speaker. He is also the author of a whole host of books, including Why Customers Leave and How to Win Them Back, It's Not Who You Know, It's Who Knows You, and Visibility Marketing. David, it's great to have you here on Project HR.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So, David, this book has its basis in a video series. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about that video series?
Yeah, I speak for a living. I speak on customer experience and marketing. And for so many years, I get off stage and people are very nice to me. I consult, I speak, but then they say, how do we keep the conversation going? I don't want to lose momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of the spark for me to realize that how do we keep these important conversations going among staff members, among team members throughout the year? It's not just the conference, it's not just the meeting or the event, but it's an ongoing process. So I developed this series called the Morning Huddle. And it was me delivering content every Monday morning. I guess the teams could choose what day they wanted to meet with their team, and being the catalyst for these important conversations about how the world has changed, about how we engage with our customers, our clients internally, the internal processes that lead to customers getting what they want faster and simpler and less complicated. And so the scripts for all of those morning huddles, I realized as I look back, during the pandemic was, I've got about 50,000 words here, and realized that this works in a lot of different mechanisms, a lot of different venues. It's not just those who are watching a video and having a conversation with their team, but what about the 45 million solopreneurs and other entrepreneurs, or leaders who aren't necessarily willing to make this jump in committing their organization to these weekly meetings, but it gives them a sense of what the content is. So whether they use it individually as a book, stick it next to their bedside, highlight pages, dog ear, or they realize this is an important conversation we need to have with our team, or a series of important conversations. So now it's a video series, it's a book. And what's really exciting is that it's sparking some great internal conversations.
And what kind of feedback have you had making this jump from video, over to a book? Have you gotten different people into your universe because of it, or how has that changed things?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. It was, how do we broaden the reach for those who are in large organizations? We're in 4 different languages now in countries around the world with thousands of subscribers. Is how do we reach more people with an important a series of important messages? And so the feedback has been great. It's also introduced people to the video series, but I think it's less about what I'm selling and more about the conversations that organizations are having. And so that to me is the most gratifying part, is that it's bringing to light issues and challenges and things that people maybe didn't think about. What's changed in the world. In so many ways, COVID has accelerated what has long been predicted about how we're going to do business and how we're going to connect and converse. And that has an impact on the people who do business with our company, and what they come to expect and demand and what their preferences are. And so the purpose of the book is to spark those conversations. The book isn't really about how to hold a morning huddle per se. I think people are already having meetings. How do we infuse it with greater content? So that we can do something different and better and become and remain competitive in the marketplace.
Sure, and that makes perfect sense. And in the next segment, I want to get into some of the specific conversation starters that are in the book. But in general, what was your vision for how people might use the book, and have you seen people using it in different ways than you anticipated?
Well, yeah, actually, I have seen them using a little different. For me, the purpose was just to provide the content. I think people are reticent sometimes to, oh, the last thing we need is another meeting, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So this is about, it's a done for you model. It's like, here's a subject for you to talk about. Here's a story to illustrate the point. Here's the dangers of doing it wrong. Now let's have a conversation. I mean, I don't even care if people agree with the points that I make. I think in most cases they will. I think it really brings to light some important issues. But the important thing is that the organizations and the teams understand what they believe and why they believe it and how they're going to behave as a result in one particular aspect. And the next week, it's a different particular aspect.
Mhm.
So the way they're using it is a catalyst for a conversation. And then ultimately, they make the decision. Are we going to add a new amenity? Are we going to change our policy in terms of how we are going to engage or accommodate based on changing market conditions? They
Mhm.
get to make the decision. You get to make the decision. My job is to be the catalyst for that conversation. So the part that's been a little bit unexpected is with each of when I do the video series, there's sort of a facilitator's guide. Here's some sample questions.
Mhm.
And I expected sort of the team leader to, here's the situation, here's the issue, what do we think about it? And what I've really appreciated is so many great team leaders within organizations are using this as a model to develop their leaders as well. And so I've got one company, a huge architectural firm that with multiple offices around the country, and every week, a different person leads the conversation. And they're asking their people to step up. You be the person to lead the conversation. And so they get practice at leadership, they get practice at listening
Mhm.
and spurring conversation. I mean, at the very core, this is really about crowdsourcing. It's about
Hmm.
crowdsourcing your own company
Hmm.
for the best ideas. I'm a big believer that the
Yeah.
best ideas are within your own company. Sometimes it just takes an environment, a safe environment to bring out
Mhm.
some of those great ideas. But I
Sure.
think staff members and team members are the ones who are dealing with these issues every day. But oftentimes, leaders don't even realize that issues, excuse me, the issues are festering because they're being dealt with on the front line. And so this is a great way for them also to bring some of these challenging issues to light. Times when a customer might be frustrated, times when internal processes are delaying getting customers and clients what they need,
Mhm.
and involving everybody in the conversation.
But I don't think that this is the kind of book that someone sort of reads and internalizes and then sort of works into their daily life. It's more actionable than that. Like you even said, having it next to your bedside and referencing it, I can see post-it notes, that sort of a thing. How did you anticipate that going? Is it something where an organization can sort of adopt these ideas, or is it something you go back to again and again and again for inspiration?
Well, I think it's both. I think that the most important part is that they'll take an individual subject, an inch wide and a mile deep, and say, we're going to deal with this subject this week. And
Hmm.
for those who, for those who want a done for you model, I present the same content on video and spark the
Hmm.
conversation, and they can watch it on the screen. But for others, a leader can read a chapter and say, this is an important subject for us to
Hmm.
deal with our team. So maybe a lot of organizations already have a morning huddle or a weekly meeting.
Sure.
This is one of the subjects that's going to be on the agenda. Say, listen, I read this thing. Or they have a copy for everybody on staff and say, everybody's going to read chapter 12 this week. And we're
Hmm.
going to talk about it at our next meeting.
Hmm.
So from that way, it's not meant to sort of necessarily even be read as a whole. You can read one chapter, you can open up to any page, and just each one is an essay, brings an important issue to light, tells some stories to make it manageable, create
Hmm.
references, maybe something in stories
Yeah.
that help it make sense. And then
Hmm.
say, we're going to talk about this. And then what do you think about this? Do you see this? Oh, you know what? I saw this. I probably get this asked 3 times a week. Oh, I have one, right? And then you have that conversation. And
Sure.
so it's meant to be, as you had said, a very actionable book. It's not a
Hmm.
passive endeavor.
Right.
But then it's also something to revisit because I don't think any of these things are one time occurrences. And because everything is changing in how we engage and what we expect of our vendors and our partners
Hmm.
and of each other within organizations. So
Yeah.
each time that we bring it up, the answer might even change a little bit, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, and anything these days on the customer experience in a theoretical sense, it's hard to apply it. I mean, nothing is what it once
Sure.
was, and so how do these conversations? And I know we haven't really dug into the specifics of them, but how do these conversations lead to an improved customer experience? Can you kind of draw those connections for us from what you're teaching to what people are doing?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is on the macro level. We create policies and procedures. We create a customer journey. Here's how they're going to learn about us. Here's how they're going to ask questions and research and buy and customize and deliver. And we create this whole process because it works. And where it doesn't work, we tweak it. And it's profitable and it's predictable. And when we can have some measure of predictability of customer behavior, then we can budget for that. We can train for that. The problem is your customers haven't read your employee manual.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how they're supposed to do it. And so when we create and create an environment for conversations to happen, then we can address issues. We can find out about points of frustration or bottlenecks in our process and adjust those. So I think the ongoing conversations is the really important part of being better at what we do, because sometimes we can get a little bit rigid. I had a conversation with somebody a few months ago, and they said, listen, if we've been talking about customer experience or customer service, which is related, for 30, 40 years, how could it possibly be getting worse? And I said, well, it's getting worse because we're getting more rigid, because we're trying to control what we can, because we can't control the economy or competitors or pandemics. So as I said, we create processes that create some measure of predictability for our teams, right? And for our training and everything that we do from an HR perspective. And as I said, the world is changing and our customers don't know what they're supposed to do. So having the conversations to continually tweak and adjust our processes and our policies and what we say yes to and what we say no to, or maybe even the services or products that we offer, all come from revisiting this on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And what you were saying a minute ago about sort of crowdsourcing it internally also, gives them that boost of, hey, we're creating this together. It's not just a policy or procedure that's been handed down, but
Absolutely.
We treat our customers in this way because we treat our customers this way.
And we treat each other in this way.
Exactly.
And here's what we expect of each other, so we don't have bottlenecks that, ultimately our customers need to buy from us. And everybody within the organization has a role to play in streamlining processes and operations. But you're right, also from a human perspective, that it's important for everybody to be involved, not just so that they're bought into the solutions because they were a part of the process. We all know that's important, but because we actually are going to get better ideas from our own people, because they're the ones engaging in this process. Even if staffers don't have direct customer connection, they are a part of that overall continuum, whether it's billing or manufacturing or shipping or whatever the organization does. Everybody is a cog in that wheel, and we need all voices at the table.
Love that. Love those ideas. All right, David, we're going to take a quick sponsorship break right now. When we return, I want to get into some of those specific conversation starters, so stay with us.
Hi, thanks for listening. And also thanks to Proofbox for supporting this week's episode of Project HR. Proofbox is like Netflix for labor relations. Every video, every resource, immediately at your fingertips. Instantly stream the employee communication titles you need and allow members of your leadership team to do the same. Learn more at unionproof.com/proofbox.
And we're back with David Avrin, author of The Morning Huddle, Powerful Customer Experience Conversations to Wake You Up, Shake You Up, and Win More Business. So, David, what are the benefits of engaging in frequent morning huddles like the ones that you outline in the book?
The advantage is, first and foremost, we're engaging our team. So they're a part of the process. They're not getting disconnected. The second one is we stay current. And that's the most important. As fast as things are changing, look at there's big companies and products that were a big deal 2 years ago that may not exist the next year. The life cycle of companies and products used to be 100 years, 50 years, 20 years. Sometimes it's 2 years because we already have found a different and a better way to do it. So the overall goal of these ongoing engaging conversations that I talk about in my book, The Morning Huddle, is to guard against irrelevance, to future-proof your business. We hear a lot about disruption, and disruption is just a really unique way of thinking. If we were going to start over, how would we do it differently? If we weren't bound by legacy systems or people or processes or leases or technology, and we were going to start solving that problem today, how would we do it differently, right? And that's when you get Uber and you get Airbnb and really creative companies that solve traditional problems different ways. my admonition when I speak to organizations, when I consult with organizations, is don't wait for others to disrupt your industry. You do it. And that
Mm-hmm.
comes from conversation. It comes from challenging ourselves, putting teams together and saying, let's redesign this point of contact. How can we take a 12-step process and reduce it down to a 7-step process? What does that mean in terms of time savings and all of those as well?
Hmm.
Because when this happens to us and we scramble to catch up, that's disruption. That's what happened to Circuit
Right.
City and
Right.
Blockbuster and Toys R Us and
Mm-hmm.
Kodak and all of that as well. That's disruption. But when we do it to ourselves and challenge ourselves, that's just innovation. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. Disruption happens to you. Innovation is driven by us and our team and our organization or our industry. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I do when I speak at conferences and conventions for associations where everybody's within the same industry. And I challenge them. I said, disrupt your own industry.
Mm-hmm.
You be the architects of the future of your industry. Don't let somebody on the outside. I spoke to a huge convention of dentists. And I said, listen, I can't even imagine today graduating from medical school as an orthodontist with $300,000 of debt and turning on the TV and seeing a commercial for Smile Direct Club,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's petrifying. And
Sure.
so disruption is a real thing. As consumers, it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I have my groceries delivered.
Yep.
I love this.
Yep. Me too.
I
Yep.
would never have done this, and I'm not going back. The
Yep.
world is changing. And
Yeah.
so to go back and answer your question is, what's the benefit? The benefit is we future-proof our organizations by engaging in consistent conversations. We know the serendipity of those unexpected conversations that happen in the hallways between meetings and events. We know the serendipity of that cocktail napkin idea that we write down at a business lunch or in the break room. What if we scheduled serendipity? What if we put those conversations on the calendar? And that's what the Morning Huddle is all about.
Mm-hmm. So the book is meant to be a catalyst for these group conversations. Truly within an organization, how many people need to take part of those conversations for this to be effective?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's also one of the big unexpected learnings for me. Sometimes the groups are as little as 2, and sometimes they're system wide. I have a financial services company that's in multiple states, and each office does their own morning huddle on a different day. I mean, some of these take only 20 minutes.
Hmm.
I mean, the videos is 7 minutes long.
Okay.
It's not motivation. It really challenges them. And then they have a conversation. Some of them, they make it as part of the regular morning huddle conversation. So I've seen groups as little as 2, 3, and then also massive organizations. We're also in Spanish, we're in Hindi, we're in Mandarin Chinese.
Hmm.
But for the book itself, part of the rationale and the reason and the motivation for the book was I had a lot of people who said to me, I don't have anybody to huddle with. It's just me, or I'm an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, or
Mm-hmm.
I aspire to growing, or I don't feel comfortable necessarily engaging the team, but I'd like to consume the content and percolate on all of this as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of entrepreneurs and individuals who are reading a chapter, getting challenged on their belief systems, and at the end of every chapter, it's got three different sections. So I lay out the subject, and then it says, here's why you do it. Sort of let them off the hook. I understand
Right.
the business behind your decision, your policy, but as consumers, here's why we hate it. And here's a better approach.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it's starting the conversation. It's meant to be both diagnostic and also prescriptive. But at the end of the day, the prescription is up to you and your own team.
Mm-hmm.
What works for a manufacturing company doesn't necessarily work for a professional services organization. But I think the concepts are broad and they're relevant and they're important. And I think
Mm-hmm.
more than anything else, these are important conversations that we know as an organization, as a team, we're going to deal with them when a crisis occurs. Isn't it better to have the conversation beforehand, come to a measure of consensus? Here's what we believe. Here's how we're going to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we're going to do to accommodate so that we're prepared and we're consistent as a team.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a little bit ago, it doesn't really matter, how many people take part in it.
No.
It's entirely inspirational when you talk about, disrupt your own business. Think about how you can innovate. So, what's the goal for these conversations? Are we inspiring people? Are we brainstorming new ideas? What's really the goal behind this?
Well, I appreciate it. I've never seen myself as a motivational speaker. I'm the one. I'm not the one who says you can do it. You got to believe in yourself. You got to reach deeper. I'm the one who's saying, stop frustrating your customers.
Sure.
And so,
Yeah.
I think the goal is that there is action. I mean, it can't be just because honestly, Jennifer, what you're going to get is a revolt of your team if they feel like their time is being wasted.
Hmm.
You're going to get eye rolling. You have a conversation that says, we need to provide great service. They're going to give you that duh look and like, really? Did we need to turn off our phones and have a meeting for this? So my challenge, and this was a really tough one that made me better at what I do, is I had to every week come up with content that passed the duh test. It had to be something to go,
Sure.
I hadn't thought about that. Or boy, that's a really challenging question.
Yeah.
And so they have to do something with it. So it can't be too obvious. It has to be something that is relevant across the board. And so the goal of it is that they do something, that they say, is this an issue? Is there something that we need to do as a result of this? Do we need to put a small team together to look into what a new policy might mean and how we might enact that? And in some cases, it's just creating top of mind awareness, like be conscious when this kind of a situation occurs, because here's how your customers are feeling. And it's not that, I mean, here's the point. It's not that customer loyalty is dead. It's just a lot harder to earn and a lot harder to keep because it's becoming increasingly easy to leave you because the choices are vast.
Yes.
And so even top of mind for some subjects, and there isn't a specific action or policy attached to it, could mean the difference between somebody leaving and somebody staying, or telling others, or going online and leaving a positive review, or preventing a negative review. I mean, these are so impactful to business success and business futures. This is not touchy-feely.
Right.
It's really important conversations for organizations.
And truly impacts the bottom line. But going back to that duh eye roll kind of reaction, how
Sure.
long do you imagine these conversations taking? Is it, is it something that we could add to the end of a meeting and still benefit? Or is it something we need to like truly focus on? This is the reason for this meeting.
That was the surprising part. As I was developing this, I had very clearly in my mind, if this is arduous, if this is complicated, they're not going to do it. And so I leave it to them. We're getting a lot of organizations. It probably takes 8 to 10 minutes to read one of these chapters in the book, or the same amount of time for those who subscribe to the video series. But then the conversation can be anything from 10 minutes to some organizations say they do an hour once a week. I had one that did. He said we meet Tuesday mornings at 7:30 and it goes for an hour. But they said, but the conversation takes these twists and turns. And I said, is that a bad thing? He says, no. He says, because now they're talking, because everybody's busy. But unless you, like I said, schedule that serendipity and have those conversations. So for most organizations, honestly, it's probably 20 minutes.
Okay.
And a lot of them are putting it, some of them are creating a morning huddle. They didn't have it. And other organizations I've spoken to, they were somebody who was in an audience where I spoke and they were very interested and then engaged with this. They said, we've been doing a morning meeting for 20 years, but sometimes we struggle for, what are we going to talk about this week?
Content. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, will you share with us a few of your favorite conversation starters and give us an idea of what these sound like? I know everybody's probably waiting to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there's some obvious ones about trying to make sure your customers don't wait or be flexible. But there's other ones that have really elicited some great feedback. There's one where I tell a story about I ask the question, how often do we throw our coworkers under the bus? I mean, we don't want to take the blame for something that's not our fault, but if the food came out wrong, oh, so sorry that, the kitchen screwed that up, or, the shipping is late. Oh, sorry, somebody in shipping put the wrong label. Well, you just saved face, but you made your company look bad. You made somebody else look bad.
Yeah.
And so the whole purpose of that conversation is saying sometimes honesty isn't the best policy when honesty is irrelevant. It's not that we tell them something they don't care. They just want their problem solved. And so how often do we sort of resort to that behavior? I tell a story about where I fell into that and I got called out by a client. And, sometimes the best stories are the ones where you don't look very good. And we inadvertently, oh, so sorry, let me fix that. Somebody screwed that up. it doesn't help anything. Just fix the
Mhm.
problem, right?
Right. Right.
There's another one where I talk about how often do we really see beyond and see the humanity of the person. I tell a story of my oldest daughter when she was very young. Just had the biggest. She just saw the world as the friendliest place. Her mom always had funny hats on her, and people just smiled at her, and she saw nothing but smiles every day, and it changed her. It molded her into a person that saw the world as a friendly place.
Hmm.
And so I gave the admonition of saying, look across the transaction and see the humanity. Think about what happened in the last 24 hours to that person.
Hmm.
Who do they serve? What do they do with their kids or their family or their challenges? Because when we see people as more than just that transaction,
Mhm.
and it's not that we're dismissive, but when we really see them for their humanity and the wonderful, complicated, interesting person that they are, it affects how we behave towards them. It affects our level of compassion when they're
Mm.
frustrated or things like that. And then there's another one where I talk about how often do we think we know what the other person wants. I talk about a conversation I had with somebody about my internet provider, and every time I started talking, they talked over me about here's what we don't do, here's what we, here's our policy. I said, no, but that's not my issue. And then I just keep talking, and then they're talking over me again. And I'm like, listen,
Mm.
I promise you, the script you want to deliver is not nearly as important as the conversation your customer wants to have.
Sure. Yeah.
And how we often get into sort of these robotic things because we've done it 100 times. Listen, we
Mm.
know what their issue is. Well, no, you don't
Mhm.
until we listen. And so
Brilliant.
each one is a different subject.
Mhm.
It's, how are we soliciting feedback? Recognize that somebody's always watching.
Hmm.
We kind of have to do business today as if every one of our customers or clients is armed with a video camera
Yeah.
because they are.
True. Yes. For sure.
I
Yep.
joke about this on stage. I say, listen, I'm 57 years old. Growing up, we did stuff. There is no record of it.
There's no evidence.
Can I get an amen, please?
Yep. For sure.
It's a challenging time.
Yep.
I've got 5 kids between my kids and my stepkids, and boy, there's a permanence to infractions today.
For
And
sure.
there's so little grace for just honest mistakes. Now everything is on YouTube, and so we
Mhm.
kind of have to be very conscious with the conversations that we're having. We all have. You ever been in a situation where you hear somebody complaining, "Oh, I got to work a double shift," or they're about their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever else? And I'm thinking, do you not know that we can hear you,
Mhm.
or do you not care? And
Mhm.
so I
Yeah.
addressed the issue, saying,
Yeah.
how do we don't want to stop people from being human, but we got to realize that somebody's always watching and somebody's always listening. And of course, I
Yeah.
tell stories that help illustrate the points, but these are important conversation starters.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Those are great.
it's a reflection of the content.
David, we're going to take some time out for another quick break. We're going to be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and our guest today is David Avrin, author of The Morning Huddle, Powerful Customer Experience Conversations to Wake You Up, Shake You Up, and Win More Business. And we are back. So, David, have you ever encountered teams or individuals that were resistant to take part in these conversations? And if you've encountered that, how do you bring them into the discussion?
In most cases, they're always resistant, at least
Hmm.
on the front end. And so the resistance is the organizational leader who thinks, oh, my people aren't going to want this. And I overcome it a couple of different ways. One is I put samples, like for the video series on the website, customerexperienceadvantage.com. There's samples. So they see what it really is. But it really does come from the top because in
Mhm.
the minds of the unindoctrinated, it's another meeting. My God,
Mhm.
please don't. The last thing I need is
Mhm.
another meeting. And I knew when I was developing the content for this that it can't be another meeting. And if it is another meeting, then people will abandon it early or be resistant to adopt it. So it's about early engagement. It's about having that initial conversation and people going, you know what, this really was worth our time
Hmm.
because it makes their life easier. It means
Mhm.
they're being heard. That something that has been a constant challenge is being recognized and acknowledged and considered and addressed and corrected. And so it's you get through the first one or the first two and you realize this is important because we have to prioritize internally as an organization. Time is finite. And the last thing we need is another meeting. And it reminds me of my early days in corporate America and that someone had implemented the bowling ball meeting. Have you ever seen that?
No, what is
So
that?
it's a stand-up meeting when somebody wanted to call a meeting, it was going to be a stand-up meeting and they had a 14-pound bowling ball. And if you wanted to talk, you had to hold the bowling ball,
Oh, that's brilliant.
which kept conversation shorter.
Yep.
It made people think long and hard before they raised their hand and they wanted to add input. And I just thought it was hilarious. And it was a
Yep.
great way to shorten meetings,
Yeah.
make sure people got down to business. But it's also reflective of the resistance because we have all suffered from death by meeting. So
Sure.
this is not that.
Yeah.
And it's not a dictation. It's not a let's nail people and call out what's not being done. But it's also not one. A lot of people have been resistant. Either they had a standard morning meeting that they ran out of content, so it kind of petered out, or they had one that devolved into a complaint session. We've all been in an organization where they devolve in the best of intentions for these meetings, but then it's somebody's this and why is so and so doing breaks, or why aren't we having casual Friday? I guess I'm showing my age. But this is different. And so the resistance comes from an expectation and a misunderstanding that this is that. And they learn very quickly that it's not. And as long as there's organizational leadership buy-in, and they're taking the mantle of doing the hard and the engaging follow-up questions in the conversations.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk at the beginning of the show. We mentioned that the Morning Huddle is just one of your books. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of your other books?
Sure. Well, my most recent book was an unexpected hit. It was called Why Customers Leave and How to Win Them Back. In Forbes, it was named one of their top 10 of the year for 2019. We're in 5 different languages. And I kind of wrote it just a bit curmudgeonly. Here's all the things that just tick me off and frustrate me about working with business. And my wife wasn't necessarily a great sounding board because she's so nice and so patient. I'm the one who's, at the grocery store and, they direct me to self-checkout. And I'm like, no, sorry, I don't work here. And I'm not trying to be demeaning. I'm terrible at self.
Right. Sure.
Every item is an unexpected item in the bagging area. So there's chapters like stop making us do your work and all of these things. And, stop spamming your best customers. Somebody, bought from you. So now let's send them an email every day. You buy anything on Overstock, you're going to hear from them 5 times a day. And so, boy, did it strike a nerve. And so Why Customers Leave was the one that really kicked off this customer experience one in a significant way. And then the follow-on book is this new one, which is the Morning Huddle, which was how do we take these frustrations, these challenges, and create conversations among our team to address them. So it's not just here's me complaining, here's all the things that we hate. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah, make it actionable.
So it's worked out really well that way. And so now even the Morning Huddle is morphing into a membership model where there's those who are really committed to this. There's webinars and there's other content and community where people can ask each other questions. And it's a real exciting time for the business.
Yeah, for sure. And I can see where it resonates with teams and bringing people together to serve this common goal. I think that's outstanding.
And each one is making it their own. They're making it unique to their organization. Once again, my job is to be the catalyst for the conversation. And organizations, their job is to engage their people.
Yeah. So I also wanted to touch on your blog, Common Grounds, as well as the Customer Experience Advantage podcast. Where can our listeners find out more about those?
Sure. All of that is on my website, which is just davidavrin.com, AVRIN, and podcast and my blog. And it's all about, once again, it's about starting good conversations so we can get better because we have to get better. And if you have a business model that was created 20 years ago without a lot of tweaks, the world has changed around you. And so I offer content. Of course, I speak and do a lot internationally as well and consult. And I love what I do.
Yeah, excellent. And I want to let our listeners know that links to David's website, as well as links to his blog, his podcast, and a link to buy the Morning Huddle will be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to unlock that today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, David, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are questions we ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
All right. Okay. So our first question is always a topic showdown. Now, in this episode, we've been talking about ways to improve customer experience. And the phrase, the customer is always right, was coined over 100 years ago by a group of retailers. And then automaker Enzo Ferrari is famously quoted as saying, the customer is not always right. In your opinion, David, which of those quotes better reflects modern thinking?
Oh, I think there's a third one, and I'm gonna cheat on the question.
All right.
The customer always has to be heard and acknowledged.
Okay.
That's it. As long as they know that we've heard them, it doesn't mean the answer is always yes, or the customer is always right. If you got a vegan restaurant, somebody orders a buffalo burger, sorry, that's a hard no. But here's for your audience, here's the magic phrase. No matter what the situation, even if they're not right or even if they're not happy, here's the magic phrase. Let me tell you what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
That alone signals to them that we are being accommodating, that we're looking for solutions. Customers sometimes right, customers sometimes wrong. It doesn't matter. They have a power today to hurt us online with reviews and others in a significant way. So it is incumbent upon us, from an experience perspective, is to make sure that everybody leaves feeling heard, respected, accommodated at whatever level that we can. And so even if we can't, the answer is, let me tell you what I can do.
I love that. We need to teach every employee at every company to use that phrase.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question. What's the best book you've read recently?
Oh, best book. You know what? There's a book by a woman named Robbie Kellman Baxter called The Membership Economy, about finding your super users and mastering the ongoing transaction. Absolutely life-changing for me. But it's not just about sort of subscription models for content and membership, but it's the sort of the motivation behind it, what we want to be involved in, what makes us stay, and what causes us to leave, and where points of frustration. But super recommended, called The Membership Economy.
I'm going to read that one. That sounds right up my alley. So,
love it.
All right. So what's your favorite thing about working in customer experience?
My wife would tell you that my favorite thing is that I get to rant about the things that I don't like, because that's kind of me. But honestly, being able to see, helping organizations get it so they can transform in a way to keep them relevant. Because I think the only ones that are going to survive are companies that are remarkably easy to do business with. And so the best part of it is A, it's current, and B, I know that I can influence that in a big way and help them be better.
Brilliant. I love that. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Oh, hands down. Say please and thank you.
That is a good one.
I mean, that's it. I mean, the most useful, relevant advice my parents ever gave me that has proven out time and time again. Say please and thank you.
Yep, it matters. All right, last question. Who or what inspires you?
Who or what inspires me? Okay, this is going to sound really hokey. Humanity. Watching YouTube or TikTok videos of somebody stopping traffic to let a duck and her ducklings cross the road. Somebody doing something kind and helping somebody. I know that sounds so sappy, but I think we're in such a rush, and there's so much dog eat dog and so much hatred and bipartisan or partisanship and everything else, is that when we see those, the dog helping his puppy learn to climb a stairs. I know it sounds so silly, but those are things that just make me smile. Kindness inspires me. Yeah, those little tiny perfect things that you have to look for. All right, thanks for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, David. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to our listeners. And once again, this is your reminder to grab the companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you'd like to be on Project HR, or you know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. And last but certainly not least, to make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR, we hope you'll subscribe to the podcast. Drop us a line, leave us a review, or give us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.